You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you dry it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth. Hey!
Spanning the globe to bring you the latest developments in medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja.
We love the herb.
It's time for the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville. Now, here's your host, Russ Belville.
Good day, tokers and tokettes and non-toking lovers of liberty. It is Wednesday, June 21st, 2017, and it's got to be 420 somewhere in the world. Happy summer solstice, and for those of you 10% of the Earth's population living in the southern hemisphere, happy winter solstice. It's summer. It's beautiful here in Portland, Oregon. The sky is blue and the temperatures are balmy. And we've got a jam-packed show for you today. Coming up in our Hemp Day, Hump Day update, one of the most joyful people I know, Joy Beckerman from Hemp Ace International, joins us to talk about Washington State's first legal hemp crop in over 90 years. In Drug War Data Mining, we take a look at a new report from the Marshall Project and the Center for Investigative Reporting showing that, what do you know? You legalize marijuana, cops search traffic stop victims far less often. So we'll get to that. Excited about that data. And in our Southeast Cannabis Chronicle, we take a look back at the Virginia Cannabis Conference, where we got to meet with Delegate Steve Heretic. We also heard from John Hudak from the Brookings Institute, and my interview with activist Creed Leffler, who's fighting for medical cannabis access there in Virginia. Then we'll end the show with a radical rant. It's up on hightimes.com right now, how Philando Castile's audacity to smoke marijuana got him killed. It's all coming up next on the Marijuana Agenda.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Looking for the 420 friendliest way to visit beautiful legal Potland, Oregon?
I'm Lori Duckworth, inviting you to come stay with us at Delta 9 House and Studios.
You get your own private room with queen bed and access to our high-speed Wi-Fi, premium entertainment system, and more.
We'll even cook you breakfast. Look us up on Facebook at Delta 9 House.
That's facebook.com/Delta9House. Delta 9 House is booked through Airbnb.com. City of Portland permit number 17-159855. And now, in the interest of fair and balanced journalism, the Marijuana Agenda presents this anti-drug public service announcement.
So, you finally got to wear your shoes the right way. You're picking out your own clothes, your own music. You're going to the mall by yourself. And that haircut? That was your idea. You're making your own decisions. So don't blow this one. Don't smoke pot.
To combat this sort of reefer madness, listen to the Marijuana Agenda every weekday at mjagenda.com.
The Marijuana Agenda. Like the liberal agenda, but with profits. Ka-ching.
Hi, I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Putting together the most comprehensive live weekday marijuana news talk program is a full-time job. Now you can do your part to ensure that listener-supported independent cannabis radio journalism can continue by becoming a patron of the Marijuana Agenda. Just log on to mjagenda.com and click the Become a Patron button. For your $4.20 monthly donation, you'll receive over 20 hours of original first-hour podcasts, plus other materials only available to paid subscribers. Or for just $9.99 a month, become a VIP patron. You'll get over 40 hours of podcasts for the complete program, including Toker Talk Radio, plus ad-free downloads of the segments heard on the Marijuana Agenda. Plus, VIPs get exclusive access to the video replay of the 2-hour live stream show and downloads of the spreadsheets and charts I provide from my years of curating marijuana data sets. Thank you for your support, and remember, I cannot do it without you. Please become a patron today at mjagenda.com.
This is your Cannabis Headline News. Brought to you by MarijuanaMoment.net, the complete source for all your marijuana news in one morning newsletter from Marijuana Majority founder Tom Angel. Subscribe today for free at marijuanamoment.net.
This is your Cannabis Headline News for Wednesday, June 21st, 2017. I'm Russ Belville. The Department of Justice Office of the Inspector General announced yesterday that the 2013 Smart on Crime initiative, launched by former Attorney General Eric Holder, quote, made progress, end quote, in two top priorities of reducing mass incarceration. The inspector's report says the Smart on Crime initiative succeeded at, quote, focusing resources on fewer but the most significant cases, end quote, and ensuring that offenders charged with, quote, low-level, nonviolent drug offenses and who had no ties to large-scale organizations, gangs, or cartels generally would not be charged with offenses that imposed a mandatory minimum prison sentence, end quote. Attorney General Jeff Sessions has rescinded that policy, writing in the Washington Post that it's a, quote, false story that federal prisons are filled with low-level, nonviolent drug offenders, end quote. Sessions also wrote that since the Smart on Crime initiative, quote, softened its approach to drug offenders, the trend of decreasing violent crime reversed, drug abuse and violent crime surged, and the availability of dangerous drugs is up, the price has dropped, and the purity is at dangerously high levels, end quote. Hopes for marijuana legalization in Vermont may be dead for 2017. Associated Press reports that a Vermont state senator says negotiators have reached a deal with the governor's office to legalize the recreational use of marijuana in the state, but the fate of the proposal still rests with Republicans in the House. Democratic Senator Dick Sears says the Senate is ready to approve a bill that addresses some of the public safety concerns expressed when Republican Governor Phil Scott vetoed the proposal. For example, the proposal would create misdemeanor crimes without jail for people caught consuming marijuana. But it can't be passed unless minority Republicans in the Vermont House agree to suspend legislative rules, so it could be considered during the current veto session. Republican House Leader Don Turner says it's unlikely they will do that. A reporter from Vermont Digger tweeted that, quote, Republican Peter Fagan said his caucus will vote to suspend rules for the budget, not likely for pot bill, end quote. That would delay legislative consideration of legalization in Vermont until the chamber reconvenes in January of 2018. A judge has sided with liquor distributors in their challenge against the State Department of Taxation in a move that could potentially delay the planned July 1st start of recreational marijuana sales in Nevada. The Nevada Independent reports that Carson City Judge James Wilson granted a preliminary injunction on Tuesday that was sought by the Independent Alcohol Distributors of Nevada, saying the state is barred for now from issuing marijuana distribution licenses to anyone but licensed liquor dealers. 5 liquor wholesalers have submitted applications, although the tax department hasn't formally approved any of them, and it was unclear whether the agency could or would license them by July 1st. Voters approved a ballot measure in November that gives liquor distributors first dibs on marijuana distribution for the first 18 months of recreational sales, but includes the caveat that the department could open it up more broadly than that if it determines there are an insufficient number of liquor distributors to serve the state. Recent cases in Colorado and Washington are the first known instances of current or former pot regulators being accused of having improper dealings with the industry. Former Colorado marijuana enforcement officer Renee Rayton is accused of helping pot growers raise plants for illegal out-of-state sales, working for the illegal pot ring for $8,000 a month. In Washington, the state agency that regulates pot recently fired an employee who leased land to a prospective pot grower for $2,834 a month. Washington state prohibits state pot regulators from having a financial stake in the business. The New York State Senate on Tuesday passed legislation sponsored by Senator Dianne Savino to add PTSD to the list of qualifying conditions treatable with medical marijuana in New York State, saying, quote, this bill will bring real relief to the many New Yorkers suffering from PTSD. Veterans, victims of violent crime, police and firefighters, and others can all potentially benefit from PTSD being added to the list of medical conditions eligible for the state's medical cannabis program. This has been your Cannabis Headline News for Wednesday, June 21st, 2017. I'm Russ Belville.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
If you work in the cannabis industry, consume marijuana, or just support freedom, you need to know about breaking policy news that affects you. Marijuana Moment is the daily newsletter that helps you stay on top of all the latest and most important state, federal, and international cannabis developments. Brought to you by longtime legalization activist Tom Angel, Marijuana Moment puts a concise yet comprehensive overview of cannabis news in your inbox early every weekday morning. Wake up to Marijuana Moment and rest assured you'll be ready for the cannabis news that's driving the day. Subscribe now at marijuanamoment.net. I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 4 weeks for cannabis sports medicine from the Gridiron Cannabis Coalition. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the pharmaceutical agenda, without all the side effects, overdose deaths, insurance.
Side effects may include nausea, dry mouth, and constipation. Dry mouth, constipation, indigestion, and abdominal pain,
which can occur without warning and may cause death.
At Herbie's Cannabis Seeds, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best quality seeds from the world's most respected cannabis seed producers, all at the lowest online prices. You can find Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. All cannabis seeds are sold as souvenirs and as a means of preserving cannabis genetics. Herbie's Seeds in no way intends to condone, promote, or incite the use of illegal or controlled substances. We strongly urge all prospective customers to check their national laws prior to placing an order. Herbie's Seeds at herbiesheadshop.com. Proud sponsors of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Jack Herer once said that hemp could save the planet. Today, we take a look at the non-drug use of the cannabis plant as fuel, fiber, food, and more. Now, let's restore hemp for victory in this Hemp Day Hump Day update.
It's Wednesday, and that means it's time for our Hemp Day Hump Day update. And joining us from Hemp Ace International, we have Joy Beckerman on the line. Joy, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much, Russ. Thank you for everything you do for cannabis every day.
Oh, I appreciate the thanks. And I appreciate what you've got going on in Washington State, where you're from, just north of me here in Portland, Oregon, where a lot of people don't know this, but Washington State legalized medical in 1998. They legalized recreational use in 2012, but you just barely got around to legalizing industrial hemp. What's up with that?
In 2016, and then it took us a full year to do our regulations, so we have just planted our first legal industrial hemp seeds in almost 90 years on the first week of June during Hemp History Week here in Moses Lake by Hemp Heroes Hemp Logic. And the quick answer to why it took an additional 4 years for hemp above medical marijuana, I apologize, recreational marijuana, is two reasons. One, we have a initiative process here in Washington. Not every state does, and so thanks to the American Civil Liberties Union, Initiative 502 to regulate a recreational or adult use market was made possible via that process. It got enough initials and signatures on the petition so that it made its way to the ballot, and it was voted on by the people as opposed to going through the legislature through the lawmaking process in the more traditional sense. Then what happened is we had competing bills for industrial hemp for 3 sessions after that. And believe it or not, sometimes competing bills can be just the reason why something good doesn't happen or why a good idea doesn't come to fruition. And that is that we had a Senate Republican bill and a Senate Democrat bill and a Republican House bill. And each of them wanted their bills to be the one that became law. So we had that sort of showdown and duel for a few years, but ultimately passed basically unanimously. We had one abstention.
So we've got hemp in the ground in Washington State up around Moses Lake. How many acres? What are we talking about size-wise?
All together, and the last seeds that have come in so far have been planted. Hemp Logic has planted 115 acres total so far, and they have planted all of the seeds that they were able to lawfully import, which were certified pedigreed seeds from Canada. These are commercial farmers, and we were able, of course, the Washington State Department of Agriculture, to get our CSIEA permit, which is the Controlled Substances Import and Export Act separate from the Controlled Substances Act, permit from the DEA to go ahead and import those seeds because we are a federally compliant program here in Washington.
I know that Tennessee, other states, maybe it was Kentucky, have had difficulty with the DEA in previous attempts to import hemp seed. How did Washington manage to avoid that?
So the reality of that is they haven't really had any problems at all. It's sort of an old news, old story in terms of Kentucky, the very first state to import them back in 2014, just assumed that the Section 7606 of the Agricultural Act of 2014, which we know is the Farm Bill, they had assumed that with the passage of that act and with their federally compliant agricultural pilot research program, that they wouldn't have any trouble at all importing. And the reality is that even the lawmakers, the federal legislative heroes who drafted Section 7606 weren't aware of this secondary act called the CSIEA, the Controlled Substance Import and Export Act. So what happened was Kentucky ordered industrial hemp seeds, certified industrial hemp seeds from Italy, and they were held up at the border by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. And the then commissioner of their Department of Agriculture, who's now, by the way, a U.S. Senator, James Comer, he said, enough is enough with this DEA. We are doing this lawfully. We're federally compliant. We have an agricultural pilot research program. Stop bullying us around and give us our seeds. And they said, hey, in Section 7606, it starts out with the glorious words, notwithstanding the Controlled Substances Act, but it doesn't say anything about the CSIEA, the Controlled Substances Import and Export Act. Therefore, you must fill out this form, I believe it is Form 35, to get your permit to import the seeds. And James Comer was not having it. He's such a hero, he actually sued the Kentucky Department of Ag, sued the DEA in Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And a lot of folks think that that lawsuit was won. The reality is it's settled, and it settled quickly because they needed the seeds. The DEA said, there's no fooling around here. You got to have this permit. We'll expedite the process for you. It's a 2-pager. Fill out the 2 pages, and we'll give you the permit. And Kentucky said, okay, and they filled out the permit application and got it. So the trouble comes, brother, when you're not in a state with a federally compliant program. California, for example, and I'm actually on my way to teach a continuing legal education seminar on this subject in Santa Monica on Friday, and they're not federally compliant. Oregon, your state, not federally compliant. So, of course, any state, Colorado, not federally compliant. So those states are then subject to any old seeds, which unfortunately has some downfalls. One of them is it certainly compromises our farmers since we don't have these pedigreed seeds. We don't even know the nutritional profile or the true THC content, and so it often will inadvertently turn hemp farmers into, unlicensed interstate or international marijuana farmers and importers or exporters, or causes them to lose their crop. And it exploits farmers sometimes because some of these folks are selling seeds as industrial hemp seeds for exorbitant prices, and they turn out not to be. But on top of it, this oversimplification is sort of misguided oversimplification of what industrial hemp is. We plant this magic seed, it grows this magic crop, and we can make magic 25,000 things with it. Well, not so simple. We have hundreds of varieties of, again, pedigreed, certified seeds throughout the 31 countries that have been regulating and therefore developing their industrial hemp industries, agriculturally and otherwise, for decades now. And these pedigreed seeds are for specific characteristics, unique, distinct, stable characteristics that we know when we plant that seed, that particular plant is going to come up out of the ground, whether it's a particular nutritional profile or has a certain diameter of the stalk so that the bast fiber will be just perfect for someone with biocomposite application. The manufacturing is quite sophisticated, so access to these certified seeds is crucial. Having said that, so is access to regular old family seeds so that people can grow in their backyard and do what they want to do with their hemp, and they don't necessarily need to participate in these sophisticated commercial markets. So we're doing that dance and figuring this out as we go through this agricultural and industrial revolution of reintroducing this versatile, valuable crop.
Wow, it's amazing how complex this is, and maybe you can explain to me what it is that's making Washington federally compliant, but Oregon and California not.
Certainly. So, and it was very interesting because Oregon, for example, their Attorney General, just over this last legislative session, sent a memo. It was originally marked attorney-client privilege, but released, and so I have a lawful copy of it, wrote a memo to your Oregon Department of Agriculture and said, oh, whoops, we think, after all, that we're not federally compliant. And there are two reasons for A, and this is the big one for us, we don't have a research component to our program. And the other one was also we appear to be allowing the extraction of CBD, phytocannabinoids, from our hemp program, and that doesn't seem to be lawful. The side note there is the DEA is the one saying that that's not lawful, whereas the federal legislators who drafted Section 7606 do believe it's lawful. They're fighting it out. So in an odd twist here, we have federal authorities battling it out, and so it leaves the states in this precarious position. But in this Section 7606, which I continue to refer to, and if you're in industrial hemp, that actually is kind of like a 420. It's a noun, it's a verb, it's an adverb. We are 7606. And that is because, and again, it's called the legitimacy of industrial hemp research, did two very important things. It allowed state departments of agriculture in states that permit the growth or cultivation of hemp, meaning they've already gone through a process on a state level. It's not saying states, go for it. It's saying if your state has already passed a law allowing this, your state departments of agriculture and institutions of higher learning are going to be allowed now to promulgate rules for, quote, agricultural pilot programs, unquote. The term agricultural pilot program is defined in this act, and it's defined as a research pilot program to study the growth, cultivation, or marketing of industrial hemp. It then goes on, next paragraph, to define industrial hemp for the first time in U.S. history and distinguishing it from marijuana, and it defines industrial hemp as any part of the plant cannabis sativa L, whether growing or not, that does not exceed 0.3% THC on a dry weight basis, with no carve-out for the resins. So in the definition of marijuana under the Controlled Substances Act, which I can never help but tell everyone is a direct word-for-word extrapolation of that definition from the Marijuana Tax Act of 1937. So that's the definition we live under today, is the 1937 definition. Having said that, I'm also here to reclaim the word marijuana. We're not going to let these special interest white guys from the 30s deprive us of this sacred, beautiful word marijuana. But the issue is it's an old, antiquated definition, despite what term they use for their own nefarious racist purposes. And so, but it has a carve-out for the resins within the exception to industrial hemp within that definition. And that's the definition that the DEA is holding on to, and they're completely ignoring the fact that industrial hemp was defined for the first time in 2015 within a research program with no carve-out for the resins, which is why Kentucky and our federal legislative heroes who support that bill and drafted and co-sponsored that bill say, listen, we intentionally went to liberate every part of this plant, including its resins, including its phytocannabinoids, every property of this plant. And so there's an argument going on right now still. So that's why research programs, and in fact, if you go on the California Department of Food and Agriculture, the CDFA, which is, of course, the governing body for California's brand new hemp program, which was, by the way, passed in 2013 as Senate Bill 566. But that bill said that it won't really be operational until the feds authorize it. And Prop 64 stomped all over that and said, screw that. Prop 64 said, we hereby authorize it. And actually, Prop 64 did some great things to improve on it a little bit. So the CDFA is the governing body. No regulations at all have been made yet. They only just recently, May 19th, named their advisory board, which is part of that bill, an 11-member advisory board. And they will make the rules. But if you look at the FAQs, if you just did CDFA industrial hemp in Google, you'd come right up to their homepage. There's an FAQ page there, and if it says, is our program an agricultural pilot program, literally uses the term, immediately it says, no, it's not. And there are other little tiny bits of parameters that you need to be federally compliant, and certainly that is that it would have to be registered or licensed under a Department of Ag, and California's not even bothering with that. They're saying, you'll register with your county commissioner. The Department of Food and Agriculture doesn't have shit to do with that, but you do have to register with your county commissioner. So there are lots of reasons and varying reasons why different states are non-compliant, but Washington State is compliant.
Wow. Who would have thought that it'd be so complex to get America back to cultivating the crop that our forefathers cultivated throughout the colonies? It's just amazing that you're able to keep your head around all these details. We appreciate you, Joy Beckerman, for being on our show and telling people all about this, keeping all this straight for us. And if people want to get more information, do you have a contact for yourself or other websites that could give them some more info?
Absolutely. Always feel free to check out hempace.com. That's HEMPACE, like the ace of hemp, hempace.com. And certainly I cannot say enough about the Hemp Industries Association, which is the nation's foremost brain trust on industrial hemp, founded in 1994, successful in every action we've ever taken in litigation against the DEA, and we have lawsuits right now happening, and that's thehia.org, thehia.org.
All right, Joy Beckerman, thanks so much for joining us again here on the Hemp Day Hump Day Update, and good luck on your endeavors in California.
Thank you, sir. Can't wait till next time, Russ. Bye-bye.
Bye.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. MJAgenda.com.
New beginner guitars and banjos are often constructed much better than ones built before your time. Why struggle? Get a new instrument or fix the old one. The trusted professionals at the Fingerboard Extension will evaluate your instrument for free. Repairs are priced for people who work for a living. Stop by the Fingerboard Extension downtown Corvallis at 120 Northwest 2nd Street today, or check out its inventory on the web at fingerboardextension.com.
The Marijuana Agenda, Kevin Sabet's boogeyman since 2012.
You have offended my family, and you have offended Shaolin Temple.
Yes, might have gotten away with it, too. If it wasn't for these blasted kids and their dog.
Hi, I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Putting together the most comprehensive live weekday marijuana news talk program is a full-time job. Now you can do your part to ensure that listener-supported independent cannabis radio journalism can continue by becoming a patron of the Marijuana Agenda. Just log on to mjagenda.com and click the Become a Patron button. If you're an organization or business looking to promote your brand, we have sponsorship patronage available at mjagenda.com. Sponsorship includes 15 and 30-second ad breaks and 6-minute interviews on the podcast, depending on sponsorship level, which begins at $19.99 a month. Thank you for your support, and remember, I cannot do it without you. Please become a patron today at mjagenda.com.
Promoting the end of adult cannabis prohibition is easy because we have facts, science, reason, compassion, evidence, truth, and logic on our side. It's even easier when researchers catalog it all for us. Learn how to gather the facts on marijuana use, arrests, seizures, rehabs, drug tests, and more on this edition of Drug War Data Mining.
The headline coming from themarshallproject.org says it all. How to cut down on traffic stops and searches, legalize pot. That's right. A new report is out. This one is from the Marshall Project in association with the Center for Investigative Reporting. And they took a look at stop and searches, traffic stops where the motorists are searched by police, conducted by Washington and Colorado state patrols before and after marijuana became legal in both states in 2012. The analysis was based on data obtained by researchers at Stanford, who released a report this week studying 60 million state patrol stops in 31 states between 2011 and 2015. This is the most comprehensive look at national traffic stops to date. Now, we should give a caveat on this data that it's not the whole picture because we're only talking about state patrols, not local law enforcement. So we're talking Colorado State Patrol, Washington State Patrol, but not Seattle Police Department or Denver Police Department. And of course, people of African American descent are more heavily concentrated in cities than they would statewide. So this may not give us a completely accurate picture. And you also have to figure there's a difference in how cops behave. The state police are tending to focus on accidents, impaired driving, reckless driving, and such, and as well the transport of illegal drugs across those states. Whereas the local police, your city cops, are more likely concentrating on crime and responding to calls and accidents in the city and such. So as they look at this data, we find some amazing information coming to us that shows us that, yes, indeed, we have fewer traffic stop and searches, not necessarily traffic stops, but stops that lead to a search in the places where the states have legalized marijuana. The decline was most dramatic in the state of Colorado. Looking at the state of Colorado, they found that nearly half of the search rate for African-American drivers fell. The search rate fell by half. Hispanic drivers, search rate fell by 58%. And for white drivers, there was 2/3 fewer searches after the legalization of marijuana. However, like we've found with legalization generally, with respect to arrests, we have seen also in these stops and searches a continuing of the racial disparities involved in that. And this is definitely troubling as we're still seeing the problem of people getting more likely to be searched if they are African American. As you look at those graphs on the screen, the red line being for white drivers, green for Hispanics, blue for African Americans, you can still see those lines are far above what they would be for the white drivers. And this is across the board, just like we have seen the same situation when it comes to the arrests that still remain for drugs in these cities and in these states. When we look at the searches in Colorado, this is searches per 1,000 traffic stops. A black driver or Hispanic driver before legalization was 9.6 out of 1,000. It's dropped to 4.9 for blacks, 4.0 for Hispanics. White drivers, 4 out of 1,000 traffic stops has dropped to 1.5 out of 1,000. Now, Washington State, far more searches going on here per 1,000 traffic stops. It's interesting to note the search rate for black drivers decreased by about 1/3. Hispanic drivers and white drivers declined by about 1/4. But look how many more searches are going on there. Before legalization in Washington State, 69.9 searches, almost 70 searches per 1,000 traffic stops, compared to Colorado where it was just 9.6 per 1,000. And again, that's indexed based on the population. So it doesn't matter that Washington may have more people or Colorado has fewer or whatever. This is per 1,000 drivers. So nearly 70 searches per 1,000 stops for black drivers, 51 for Hispanic drivers, 31 for white drivers in the state of Washington before legalization. After legalization, 46 for blacks, 38.6 for Hispanics, 23.4 for whites. So the searches in Washington State, even after legalization, are far greater than what Colorado had even before legalization. And these searches, this decline in these searches show that legalization takes away the cops' excuse of "I smell pot" that they use to just forfeit our Fourth Amendment rights against unreasonable searches and seizures. We take that away from them, even with 1 legal ounce, and look what happens.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
Hey everybody, it's Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda, inviting you to be like me and get your ink done at Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo, Fort Worth's most female-friendly, clean, sterile, awesome tattoo shop. Thomas and his crew are true artists who can design you a custom piece or use a design you bring in. Lucky Horseshoe also offers all styles of tattooing as well as piercings and all-around fun. In the DFW area, stop by Lucky Horseshoe Tattoo and tell them Radical Russ sent you. Trust me, it'll feel awesome.
You're listening to the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville.
I'm Russ Belville with the Marijuana Agenda. Join me every 2 weeks for the Marijuana Policy Insider with Marijuana Policy Project. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
The cannabis community is a diverse set of people from all walks of life. Conservative and liberal, black and white, straight and gay, rich and poor, and everyone in between. Learn more about the people we are freeing from adult cannabis prohibition in our Cannabis Community Chat.
Welcome to the Southeast Cannabis Chronicle. I'm Russ Belville. In January, activists gathered in Richmond, Virginia for the Virginia Cannabis Conference. Speaking there were a number of luminaries, including John Hudak, a senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, State Delegate Steve Heretic, who spoke about marijuana and its use as a pretext in law enforcement, and activist Creed Leffler, a disabled man who is fighting for medical cannabis access in Virginia. We begin with John Hudak and his opinions of the incoming Trump administration.
I heard a lot of people, a lot of progressives, a lot of liberals saying there's no difference between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. They're going to be the same thing, just another corporatist, insider hack. If you think that Hillary Clinton would have banned people from 7 majority Muslim countries yesterday if she were president, you're insane. If you think that a lot of the executive actions that have been passed in the first 9 days of this administration would have looked exactly like the executive orders and presidential memoranda that would have been passed under Hillary Clinton, you're insane. These are two very different individuals with two very different ideologies. You can hate both of them, that's fine. You can think that they're not going to push forward with the type of progress that you necessarily want. But the idea that there was no consequence between Trump or Clinton is a total misreading of American politics, of political ideologies, and of the candidates themselves. And so when you look out now at the marijuana policy landscape, people are terrified. They might have been terrified if Hillary Clinton was president, but I know one thing for sure. It's hard to guess, it's hard to make predictions about presidential politics, but here's one I am certain of. Jeff Sessions would not be Hillary Clinton's attorney general. Russ put up a lot of quotes that Jeff Sessions said. It sounded like drug war rhetoric from the 1970s or 1980s and not from 2016. But those are legitimate and serious words from a United States senator. I think Russ and I disagree a little bit about what Sessions will be like as attorney general, but there is a risk to the marijuana movement that Jeff Sessions presents. He will have the institutional power to make a mess of the marijuana industry, to make a mess of the reform movement. There is a serious need for advocacy organizations like yours, not only, again, to push forward with what you know and love and believe, and not only to help elect the officials who you think will represent your views best, but also to hold to account the individuals who the president selects to run this government. Those people need to hear your voices in the same way that they will hear other voices. There are a lot of myths out there about what marijuana policy is going to look like under Donald Trump. I've spoken at a couple of conferences in the past few weeks, and I've spoken on this issue, and I've heard people speak on this issue. There's this idea that Donald Trump isn't going to do anything negative to medical or recreational marijuana because public opinion is so high. Well, if public opinion was so high, if public opinion was the determinant of what our policy looked like, we would have comprehensive immigration reform, universal background checks for guns, and a heck of a lot of other policies that we don't have now, and we'd be scrapping a lot of policies that we do. That 62% or 63% of Americans support recreational legalization means nothing to the President of the United States. That 80 to 85% of Americans support medical marijuana legalization means nothing to the President of the United States. The other myth is that the industry is too big. You can't do anything about an industry that has grown that big. I spoke at a cannabis investors conference in LA a couple of weeks ago. This is the core of this idea that the industry has grown in such a robust way. And I was not the popular guy in the room when I told them, your industry is small by any metric of American capitalism. You are a speck of dust in a clutter of dirt of American capitalism. I said, the president, at that time the president-elect, is planning to repeal the Affordable Care Act. If you think that hospitals, doctors, and the pharmaceutical industry are small enough to be shaken down by the president, but the cannabis industry is too big to face the same challenge from the president, once again, you're insane.
Next, Delegate Steve Heretic speaking about marijuana as a pretext in law enforcement stops.
But I think, the question becomes, do marijuana arrests really serve as a Trojan horse for other types of selective law enforcement? I can tell you the amount of times I've stood in court and heard, stopped a car, strong odor of marijuana. Never once in 30 years of practicing law as I've heard anyone say weak odor of marijuana. So, obviously that gives entree to other things. Fourth Amendment issues, search and seizure, it gives probable cause to a lot of other problems. I will say this, and going back to my Board of Medicine experience, I think one of the more practical issues we're going to see if marijuana is permitted for medical types of medical use is where in Virginia you're going to find a doctor to write that prescription. Okay? Because as we all know, opiate addiction is a big, big issue today. I've taken a lot of licenses in the 10 years that I was on the board for doctors who were writing OxyContin with an open hand. Okay, and I think that there are a lot of doctors out there who are thinking, well, at least that's Schedule 2. That's kind of legal. If they're going to take my license for that, if somebody comes in with Crohn's disease or epilepsy, or other types of neurological disorders, or we need appetite stimulation for related to cancer treatment. I'm with that, but I'm sure as hell not going to put my signature on a prescription. Okay, because we know what that leads to.
Finally, my discussion with activist Creed Leffler.
Joined here by a very dedicated activist, man by the name of Creed Leffler. Creed, say hi to everybody.
Hi, everyone. Love you all.
Creed is sitting here in his chair, and he was sitting next to me at the event and brought in this sign that was all about ending the Schedule 1 designation of cannabis because he uses cannabis is cerebral palsy, is that right?
Yes.
Using cannabis to treat his cerebral palsy, and so he has a petition to tell us all about. This is on change.org, is it?
Yes, it is on change. Or no, move on. Move on. Sorry, guys.
That's okay. So you can find Creed's petition there at moveon.org. Creed and then Leffler is Leffler. They can find it that way, can't they?
It's hard to find, so it would be easier if you could post a link on your Twitter.
That's what I'll do. You just follow me on Radical Russ, and I'll post the link on Twitter so that you can sign the petition. I already signed it earlier today, and we'll get many more signatures, I'm sure. If you're not cool with the Twitter or whatever, just send me an email, radicalruss@gmail.com. So, Creed, how long have you been doing the petition and activism?
Since May.
Since May?
Yes.
A lot of response?
Yes. Some good. Most good. Some bad.
Yeah. And you were showing me some pictures of the van wrap you're trying to put together. Is that part of your crusade?
I did put a van wrap together.
Yeah.
And super excited about it.
Yeah, looks great. So, have you gone to the Virginia Assembly a lot to talk to those legislators?
No, because I've just been doing it my way.
Yeah. Are you going tomorrow?
Yes.
So this will be your first time tomorrow?
Not my first time, but my first time for this.
Yeah. Well, that's great because, I can go and tell people all about medical marijuana till the cows come home. And, what do I know? You can tell them firsthand your story and show them how it actually helps you.
Yeah, and I believe we have 2016 signatures.
Yeah.
But I haven't looked in the count in a while.
Do you know how many you're trying to get?
As many as humanly possible.
All of them. Let's get all of them. Well, I'm so glad that you're doing this and standing up for people's rights because, for everyone that's like you, there's 10 more that are too afraid to stand up for it and don't want to put the effort out. So thank you for what you're doing.
And one of my contributing factors is actually Miss Charlotte Fiki.
Yes, little Charlotte.
Yes, and I'd like to put a shout out to the Stanley brothers and the great work that they do.
Yeah.
Please get in contact with me. I would love to work with you.
All right,
on a crucial level.
Stanley Brothers, you heard it here first. Creed Leffler is ready to help. He's ready to work with you guys. And I might be able to get you in touch with those guys. So just email me and I'll see what I can do.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So visit moveon.org, sign Creed's petition. Let's get cannabis out of Schedule 1 so they can study it. We can get the full medical benefits that everyone deserves.
Love you, Radical Russ.
I love you too, Creed, man. Take it easy, bro.
This episode was produced as part of the Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville, the daily news and interview podcast covering the world of medical cannabis, adult marijuana, industrial hemp, and spiritual ganja. MJAgenda.com.
The Marijuana Agenda with Russ Belville is proudly sponsored by the Marijuana Business Association. The MJBA, called by NBC News the Cannabis Chamber of Commerce, is the fastest growing business association and the fastest growing industry in America. I've been working with the MJBA for years, and I personally invite you to join the MJBA. MJBA also publishes the popular MJ Headline News on Facebook and the MJNewsNetwork.com and Marijuana Channel 1 on YouTube. Visit MJBA.net for more details.
The Marijuana Agenda, like the conservative agenda, minus the hypocrisy.
I'm Russ Belville from the Marijuana Agenda. Join me for A Sensible Future from Students for Sensible Drug Policy every other Tuesday here on the Marijuana Agenda. Learn more at mjagenda.com/about.
Total war against public enemy number one.
10 federal criminal penalties for 1 ounce of marijuana.
Marijuana is probably the most dangerous drug.
Just say no.
Legalization is just another word for surrender.
I experimented with marijuana and didn't inhale.
This is not medicine. This is a Cheech and Chong show.
Encourage people to use less drugs.
I inhaled. That was the point.
I think it would be a mistake to legalize.
Negative reports coming out of Colorado.
Good people don't smoke marijuana.
Radical Rant.
Philando Castile's audacity to smoke marijuana got him killed. Officer Geronimo Yanez in Minnesota was acquitted of all charges related to his point-blank shooting of motorist Philando Castile a young black man whose execution or the aftermath was streamed live by his girlfriend sitting beside him while her young daughter was in the back seat. Now, after the trial, the police dashcam footage and the initial investigators' interviews with Castile and his 2 police union lawyers have been released to the public, with the shocking details that Yanez initially feared for his life, not because Castile was a self-identified gun owner, but because Yanez could smell marijuana coming from Castile's car. This is from the transcript with Yanez speaking, quote, "As I get up to the car, I'm hit with an odor of burning marijuana," Yanez told Special Agents Doug Henning and Christopher Olson of the Minnesota Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, continuing, quote, "And I know it's already been smoked, and I've been around through my training. I've been around burnt marijuana, and as a police officer, I've been around burnt marijuana and fresh marijuana. I smelled burnt marijuana. And then I see a female child in the back, and then I see a front seat passenger, adult female, in the front seat," end quote. At this point in the stop, Yanez had pulled over Castile's car for having a burnt out taillight. However, Yanez was already antsy prior to the stop, telling investigators that, quote, "We had a strong-armed robbery last week, which involved 2 African-American males," end quote, who robbed a store clerk at gunpoint. Quote, "So I was sitting at an intersection and I see a white vehicle," Yanez explained. "I can't remember what kind of vehicle it was, but I see 2 occupants, what I believed was 2 occupants inside the car, and I couldn't make out the passenger, but I knew the passenger had a hat on, and I couldn't make out if it was a guy or a girl. I just knew that they were both African American, and the driver appeared to me that he appeared to match the physical description of the one of our suspects from the strong arm robbery gunpoint," end quote. So, at the point when Yanez has approached the car and smelled marijuana, he's determined that 2 black people in a car, one of whom he can't tell is male or female, could be the violent duo who robbed a clerk at gunpoint. How is it that Castile appeared to match the physical description of a suspect? Quote, "It was I can't remember the height, weight, but I remember that it was the male had dreadlocks around shoulder length," Yanez vaguely remembered, and it wasn't specified if it was cornrows or dreadlocks or straight hair. And then just kind of distinct facial features with kind of like a wide set nose. And I saw that in the driver of the vehicle, end quote. Yanez was on the lookout for 2 black males, one of whom was of some height and some weight and had a wide nose and long hair that was styled or not. From this description, it could have been little comedian Cat Williams or giant basketball player Kawhi Leonard from the Spurs. Yanez was so nervous about the stop that he called for backup. Quote, "And this is based on information because this guy fit the description of an individual that had been armed and committed a robbery. Typically, under normal circumstances, you conduct traffic stops on your own," end quote. One of the special agents asked Yanez. Quote, "Correct," replies Yanez. With his backup in place, that's when Yanez approached the car and smelled the burnt marijuana. The rest of the story's been told of how Castile politely told Yanez, quote, "Sir, I have to tell you, I do have a firearm on me," end quote. And how Yanez thought Castile was going for his gun, and how Yanez then fires 7 bullets into Castile's body at point blank range. Quote, but as that was happening, as he was pulling out his hand, I thought I was going to die," Yanez told the special agents. "And I thought if he has the guts and the audacity to smoke marijuana in front of the 5-year-old girl and risk her lungs and risk her life by giving her secondhand smoke and the front seat passenger doing the same thing, then what care does he give about me? End quote. Never mind the reefer madness Yanez exhibits in believing that secondhand cannabis smoke is deadly, even though firsthand cannabis smoke is not. In Yanez's mind, black men who own guns and smoke pot are all the kind of stone-cold thugs who commit strong-armed robberies and tell the cops they're carrying a gun before they shoot them, I guess. For Castile, it was simply 3 strikes. Black, marijuana, gun, and you're out. But defenders of Yanez, and police defenders generally, will tell you that Castile would be alive today if he had just followed orders. But which orders? Quote, he kept his hands in view, and then I believe I asked for his license and insurance. Then I received the insurance, and then I can't remember if I asked for his ID or not, but I know I asked for his ID or his driver's license, and then he goes, I have a gun. Remember, Castile said, sir, I have to inform you I have a firearm. Anyway, continuing the Yanez quote, he goes, I have a gun. And as I'm telling him, or as he's telling me that he's reaching down between his right leg, his right thigh area, and the center console, and he's reaching down, and I believe I'm telling him something along the lines of, don't reach for it, don't do it, referring to the firearm, end quote. Reaching down for his gun, or for his driver's license. How does Castile comply in this situation? If he remains still, he's disobeying the order to get his license. If he gets his license, he's disobeying the order not to reach for it. And Castile's girlfriend testified that he was trying to unbuckle his seatbelt so he could get his wallet to produce his identification. And Castile, as he lay dying, his last words as he moaned were, I wasn't reaching for it. In the video, the dash cam video that was released to the public, Yanez is recorded on microphone speaking to another cop. First, Yanez says, quote, and remember, this is before he has spoken to the special agents. All this stuff we just told you was his discussion with the special agents. But in the video that was just 8 minutes after he had shot and killed Castile, he says, quote, Castile was sitting in the car, seatbelted. I told him, can I see your license? And then he told me he had a firearm. I told him not to reach for it. And when he went down to grab, I told him not to reach for it. And then he kept it right there. And I told him to take his hands off of it. And then he had his grip a lot wider than a wallet, end quote. So Yanez has seen Castile's gun? Well, no. As he continues speaking to the other cop, Yanez says, quote, and I don't know where the gun was. He didn't tell me where the fucking gun was. And then it was just getting hinky. He was just staring ahead. And then I was getting fucking nervous. And then I told him, I know I fucking told him to get his fucking hand off of his gun, end quote. So Yanez didn't actually see Castile's gun, but it was clearly well within his reach to potentially shoot at Yanez? Well, no. A paramedic on the scene told investigators he saw an officer, quote, put his hand quite a ways down, end quote, Castile's pocket to remove the gun. So it wasn't even out of the guy's pocket at this point. You'd think if the jury heard all this evidence, the verdict might have been different. We'll never know because the jury never heard this evidence. The prosecution never brought it up in the beginning of the case, and when they tried to introduce the transcript during Yanez's cross-examination, the judge wouldn't allow it. But what the jury did hear was the testimony of Officer Yanez, who on the stand said, quote, I was able to see the firearm in Mr. Castile's hand, and that's when I engaged him, end quote. How do you know a cop is lying? He's testifying in court. Rest in peace, Philando Castile. And we're still waiting for the NRA's response on this. Haven't heard much.
Follow MJ Agenda on Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, YouTube, and follow MJ Agenda Show on Twitter. Learn more at mjagenda.com.
That's all the time we got for today. Thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for Hour 2's Toker Talk Radio. And until next time, take care of each other, Tokers.
You try it, you roll it, you smoke it. You take a seed, you plant it, you grow it, you try it, you roll it, you smoke it, and it goes down smooth.